Good morning. It's still morning, yeah. So welcome to the session. As Joanna just said, I'm Pranav Verma, Senior Engineering Manager at Walmart Labs. Test Armada is the product which my team, developer experience tool team, builds on. And I'm extremely excited to share our journey. This presentation is going to be a little more about the iterations we went through and the challenges we faced, the solutions we came up with, and what benefits we got. So let's dig right in. And before we get further, let's look into what is Test Armada. It's end-to-end, non-opinionated test platform for web, mobile, services with actionable reporting insights. That's how we define our system. The word non-opinionated is a little interesting because normally frameworks don't have that, and I'll get you more details on that. That's an important piece of all this platform, but more on that in future slides. So as the name suggests, Test Armada is, okay, sorry, somehow it was slow. As a naval theme, so everything we do, we try to use the naval nomenclature. So we have these fleets, like different groups of tooling. As the name suggests, functional and performance testing fleets are about functional testing tools and performance testing tools. We have built up a lot more tooling over there. Data Insights is our system which contain all that data which we get from functional performance or any kind of other sources which help with the quality or getting the metrics for an application. And mocking is a set of mocking tools, which is, again, our secret sauce behind reliability. It really has been a critical factor in ensuring that our test cases are not flaky. So moving on, wanted to talk a little bit more about some other fleets which we are working on is accessibility and analytics. ADA, as you guys know, especially in e-commerce side, it's a critical thing because we often get sued by different vendors, different customers if it's not ADA compliant. So that's a thing which we are working on. Internally, we just released the phase 1 of our ADA offering, and we are working further on that. And analytics is testing the beacons. The RUM metrics, they are a core factor for making business decisions, but at times, if the metrics is not correctly ingrained in the system, you will get wrong data. So we want to build some gates around that also, that the metrics we are getting from our sites or mobile apps are properly managed. So we will, just a quick under-the-hood preview of what is Test Armada is built on. We are an open source first team. We always try to pick and choose open source tools first. Wherever it's possible, we use directly the open source one. And if needed only, then we'll try to come up with some libraries or something which is completely new. I'm not going to go detail about all these tools. You guys all know about it. The intent of this session is just about making sure how we learned from our journey. But just a few examples, like Espresso is an amazing automation tool. We didn't do anything on top of it. People can use it directly. Nightwatch, we added some extra module, Nightwatch Extra, which is, again, open source on our repository. So these are some examples where needed, as per need, we create some tools. But everything we use is open source or we build is open source. So we'll learn more about that. So every time you develop something, there has to be some core principles to guide you. And I want to just talk about the core principles which helped Test Armada to get to this current state. First, never compromise on reliability. The moment you start seeing those seas of red on CI jobs, nobody's going to trust or even look at that data. That's the #1 factor. No matter what you do, reliability is paramount. You can be as fast, you can provide all the detailed features, but if it's not reliable, it's not going to be useful and you will fail. Second, be non-opinionated. Now, how many of you over here have developed test frameworks, like for your, okay. And is that these test frameworks are being used by more than one teams overall? Like for the people who raised hands, that, okay. And have you faced a situation where other team came up and said, I don't like this choices you made. I have some other thing which I like more, has common thing. And everybody who has done test framework development will always get into a situation. And going through this multiple iteration, we have learned the fact that no matter what you do, you can never make a framework which will satisfy everybody. So we are not trying to do that. The whole idea is that if you are being flexible If there are certain components which anybody can use, then you're going more like a la carte module. Like let's say you have amazing reporting, you have amazing resource management or amazing mocking tool. There's no reason why a Node.js team or a Java team cannot use the same thing without changing their test code. And the moment you are more non-opinionated, more flexible, your platform, your framework will get more adoption. So that's another core principle, that wherever it's possible, be non-opinionated. Fast execution time, speed is definitely very important. Nobody wants to wait for hours to test to finish. So whatever you do to make things faster, work on that. That's, again, one of the core principles. And lastly, provide actionable insights. All these things, all these tests, the core purpose is that there are tests going to fail. If they're not going to fail, maybe your tests are not correct. At some point, they should fail. And then how much time it takes to get to those debugging and understanding what went wrong, that's another key. If you are getting, on typical 10% test cases fail or 5% test cases fail, and depending on the volume, that debugging time could go really high. So the key is how much actionable insights you're providing right off the bat, so people can just look at it and understand what the issue is and directly act on it. For us, the core currency for us, for all the framework teams, is developers hours. How much developers hours you're saving. And actionable insights is the core factor which saves huge, huge amount of development hours if you have correct insights already given to the users. All right, so continuing on that, let's look into the start of Test Armada. I just want to go through this journey of last 3.5 years, how we started, where we, and though we didn't have like, I'm going to go through 3 iterations. We had a lot more releases, but for this presentation purposes, I've just tried to group it into 3 different releases, and I will go through how the framework was, what kind of changes we had, and go from there. So this is how Test Armada was at the beginning. This is beginning of 2016, late 2015 timeframe. We had a build server, some teams were having their own build servers, there are multiple teams having different kind of build server CI jobs. You can trigger it through GitHub or some kind of manual time-based system, or locally just hit the test framework. It hits prod, QA, staging, and get some reports. Typical setup of a test pipeline. What we went through was the challenges we faced with that were core 3 challenges. Flakiness. Tests were randomly failing and nobody knows why. There could be some dependent services which went slow or just not working at the time, and without any code change, your test is failing. Or there's some data issues. There could be multiple things which was adding to flakiness. Slow execution, we didn't have Sauce Lab at that time. It was mostly a test were running on the CI slave, so that gives you certain restrictions on how many threads you can have. And lack of coverage, especially for a company like Walmart, which is an e-commerce space. Data is very dynamic. So you are testing against a product, somebody added to a cart, it's gone out of stock, or something else changed. You cannot run a test and assume that the data will always be there. So you cut some corners, and ultimately you end up not covering certain kind of test cases because it's just tough to replicate that. Like, how will you replicate a not in stock item, or an item which is having this different kind of taxation policy and 50,000 different kind of combination. So these were the 3 core challenges we started with to fix. And in terms of solution, the first one, the solution we came up was, okay, I need to get better at this. We built a full-fledged CI pipeline with Automation Cloud. As you can see, we built a proper CI service, so there was a centralized CI solution. Everybody who wants to run CI jobs would go through that system. We created automatically PR, master, deploy, verify jobs for them. The code used to progress. All that, the whole CI pipeline was created. We also set up Sauce Lab and test objects at that time. We were actually interfacing with test objects before Sauce Lab bought them, and that was part of the pipeline, and it was great. It was working great. We had a full-fledged system with a lot of threads on Sauce Lab. This whole CI pipeline was started working. And again, must be a very common structure for most of you guys over here. This is a typical pipeline. The other thing in terms of reliability, I was talking about the coverage issue. We implemented this mocking tool called Midway. It's again open sourced. What we did to make sure that things are reliable is every test, we want to make sure it's completely separated and not being impacted. That's the code testing 101. You want to make sure every test is as isolated as possible. Because the moment they start depending on each other, there would be some issue when you're trying to run in parallel or something else. Something will impact each other. So what we came up with is that every test case when it starts, it gets an own app server. So all our applications were React modules. So we build the app at the beginning and the mock server too. And every test got its own app, own mock server, and it ran it. And these app servers and mock servers only existed till the test case is running. When the test case is over, we kill those app server and mock server. So you have now every test getting its own environment. And with mocking also gave us an edge that all the databases or other data issues which were impacting test flakiness were completely eliminated, because now every call, every orchestration layer could be mocked wherever you want to and get your special circumstances, negative test cases, edge test cases, everything covered. So this was part of the solution that we added mocking and this whole, to solve the reliability and both the coverage thing. And this was pretty much definition of 1.0. Now, as you saw in the last system, these 3 black boxes or dark gray boxes got added. The test framework now has an option to have mock server or live data. They can pick and choose depending on every team's preference. And we also had a test lab, sauce lab, which is working. So this was our first site. This happened around 2016 Q2, Q3 timeframe. That was our first delivery. And one more interesting thing over here, which like everything which if you do too much, it becomes a problem. Everything is moderation is nice. One thing we saw, some teams got hooked up to mocking so much that they started mocking everything. We made it so easy, like everything was configuration-based. You could create every test with mock, and you can mock everything. And there were teams which just used mocking for everything, and ultimately lost touch with the real APIs. So just anti-pattern that mocking is nice, but don't lose the focus on live data. In your pipeline, if you're doing at PR verify, everything is mocked, that's fine, because at PR verify, you want to make sure the failure is because of your code, not because of somebody else's code. But don't lose the live data thing on master or deploy verify, because you want to make sure your APIs are in sync, the schema is in sync. So we released this. We saw some great benefits. Claude was talking about yesterday how we automated 100% of P1, P2 test cases. Thanks to Sauce Lab, we got great browser coverage. We had all our A-grade browsers covered. That was great. And before this, when we started, it was every sprint release, 2-week releases. So we went to daily deployment, because now it was just a function of how many test cases you have. I mean, you may go from 15 minutes to 1 hour or 2 hours, depending on how many test cases you have, but generally everybody could do daily deployments if they want to. So like everything in life, problems are not resolved. There's always new problems when you solve this. So we got this now. So first, automation insights. People were getting functional test cases, performance test cases, PR verify, master verify. If you think about it, especially at Walmart scale, very soon you have tens of different CI jobs. They all are running separately, creating their own reports. And it's very difficult to understand what's happening for your application. So maybe for individually, for a team, it's good. But if you go to a senior manager, director level, now he has several teams inside him, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. So this became a problem that, yes, we're running so much of test cases, but I don't have details on how is it performing overall. We need more insights of how our automation is behaving. Slow execution. Remember I spoke about how at first iteration, we had that test case getting its own app, own mock server, working perfectly. But there's a limit of how many app servers you can run on a slave. And the magic number for us was 64. We could not do more than 64 threads at any given time. And for when teams are starting, they had 100, 200 test cases. It was good, because you could very quickly run through all those test cases in less than 15 minutes. But when you have 500, 800 test cases, now we start getting the problem. And sometime in 2016, early 2017, we started getting to a phase where a lot of teams were having hundreds of test cases, and 64 was a little too less for them. They wanted hundreds of test cases. So we got back to slow execution. That problem still remained. Adoption. The CI services we brought up helped us in adoption. We were adopting a lot more teams, but it was a manual process. Every team used to come to us. We will take anywhere from half a day to 2 days, depending on their app, to set it up and get them on board on Test Armada. Worked great, but it used to take a lot of time from our teams, and also the timing should match. That team should have somebody to work with us, and that overall impacted adoption. We wanted a lot more teams to adopt Test Armada, and that was becoming a problem. So with that in mind, we came up with 3 different solutions for these problems. First one, we implemented session management in our mocking solution. So instead of having one app server and one mock server per test case, for the whole suite, we started having just one app, one mock. And the challenge has always been, the reason why we went to that last route was that when you run test cases in parallel, there could be 5 test cases calling the same mock server expecting different endpoint returns. So, and that's why we wanted to just be in isolation. So mock server can be returning whatever that test case at the time wants. With this session management, what happened was each test case got its own session in the mock server. So there could be 5 test cases running in parallel. One could be asking a 500 return service. One could be asking a completely 200 response, correct response. Somebody asking a negative cost price or something. Whatever you want to do, it all is completely isolated with session management. And that reduced that restriction we had of 64 threads, because we're just now running one app and one mock server, and now we could do hundreds of threads per CI jobs. The second solution was data insight and self-service portal. With this, we first came up with this self-service portal, which enabled onboarding automatically. So the idea was that if you come to Test Armada, come to our portal, and you can get onboarded without talking to us. So all the things we were doing manually, like, okay, now this is the script which you need to keep on your CI job. This is how you place this configuration file in your repository. All that thing was completely automated. You come, you add those information, and you get the script with instructions on how to do it. And it also had all these reports in one place. The challenge we were having of functional client performance, backend performance, and all these different variations of CI jobs running, all that reports in one place. So now there's one portal, which Claude actually showed yesterday in the video where he was showing how the reports are showing up for test cases. So that portal had everything. You want to get onboarded, you want to add any new test cases, test suites, or want to see reports, all that is one way. Now, we also built this data insight platform, which basically meant having these agents. So functional test agents, performance test agents, CI, and any other data source. Like it could be Jira, it could be GitHub, whatever is helping to get more insights about your app. And this went through standard data pipeline through Kafka and Kafka and Spark, and ultimately stretched in our database. We were using both document and TED databases, so Solar, Cairo, and Cassandra. And this whole thing is thanks to Walmart platform team for the managed service inside Walmart, and that's the reason why we haven't been able to open source the data insight platform yet, because we are using all these managed services. Most of our code is containerized, so with little work we can come up with a version which all these components are containerized. So that's definitely in our roadmap, that we'll open source it. But as of now, this is only available internally just because we're using those managed services. Now, this database for visualization, we use Grafana panels, again, a very common standard for industry. And we also built up this API to easily make push and pull available. So we also have some other dashboards like Hygia, a great open source plug from Capital One. X-Ray is a Jira plugin for test case management. We also have TestRail. There's multiple sources which could either we want to pull data or push data, and this API enabled with that. So we had this API and some Grafana panels, and with client just mean a REST client. So I don't know how you want to use it. If you have a REST client, then anybody can use it in any form you want. We just want to make sure that data is there, and it should be available to everybody to either use it or add it, whatever they want to do with that. And this whole thing is what Data Insight Platform is, and that's how that pumps in data to self-service portal for all the reporting. All right, the third one, with a lot more teams getting onboarded, the one more reason for slowing down was a team, like let's say you have 2,000 Sauce Lab threads, huge number of threads, right? All of us can create a hello world test, write 2,000 threads, and occupy it for as long as you want. And then every other team in the company will be queued up and will be complaining about that my tests are running slow. So we had to build some system where we are keeping a check on how these resources are being utilized. So this resource manager had 3 engines: reconciliation, quota, and priority management. Priority, as the name suggests, is about making sure that there's some kind of priority if requests are coming. So every request that goes to Sauce Lab first hits resource manager to understand what resources they can get. So this helps first in priority in terms of understanding what job is higher priority versus lower priority. Quota is, again, very important because you have to have some sanity in terms of how many test cases are running at what time. So we assign a certain quota to each team. And they can ask more, but it becomes more like a typical DevOps system where if you want to create a new API or new system, you want more cores, you ask for it, you get it, but you have a defined quota. And you have to make sure that it is ingrained in the system, because especially if you have a big organization, 1 or 2 teams can just use so much of these threads that all the other things will not matter. You'll just fail on that itself. And reconciliation is another important part. Sometimes test crashes or some CI jobs are not working. So reconciliation just goes through and makes sure that we are timing out, we are cleaning up the database and making sure correct resources are mapped with the correct active tests. If they are not, then reconciliation take care of it. And we use this a simple format that we had plugins for different kind of resources we have, which goes through our test labs and ultimately the resources. So a typical structure would be we had 3 kinds of plugin: browser plugin, device plugin, and test agent plugin. And what these plugins did was, for browser was more about internal cloud, and all these plugins go through internal, external clouds, and ultimately resources. So browser, all the browsers, basically in this case is Sauce Labs, all the Sauce Lab things we were doing. Device plugin, test objects, Firebase, all different kind of other resources you have. And test agent was some performance agents we were running. We had our own JMeter, web page test, Lighthouse, those kind of services, and they also have resources. Everything you do, you need to have resources. And through this kind of plugin, lab, and resources structure, we were able to cover all of them. Now, version 2.0. So we had the same system. Now the test lab had resource manager and also gave the flexibility that we can pick and choose external or internal labs as per our choice, as per our preference. And the report had insights, visualization, and self-service UI. And so it just added more system to the existing platform. Worked great for us. This is about last year, June timeframe. We started running around 50,000 test cases every day. With our reporting, one more key thing was that if you guys are using Jenkins, typically you have last 50 builds or last 100 builds of runs, depending on how much capacity you have assigned to your Jenkins slaves. Now that we are storing all the data in our Data Insight platform, we could retain as much as we want. 6 months we started with, we can save if you want 1 year. And what that gives us is, I can tell you for last 6 months, this is the test case which has failed most number of times. Or in last 6 months, this is the test which has been slowest. Or in last 6 months, these are test cases which got retried most number of times. All that data is there. We can do so much of analysis on top of it. It's another interesting topic which I can just talk about 1 hour, but I'll keep it 6 months for that for now. And by this time, we had 40 teams onboarded. And again, was a great win for us, a lot of high fives, and then came another set of problems. Now, these problem slides, can anybody tell me what's the difference between this slide and my last Challenger slide? Anything which was there, not here, or is it exactly same? just checking if everybody's awake. It's exactly the same slide. And that's the funny thing, that we had the same sort of problem. So we built all these reports, and now the problem was that a test failed, and I don't know if it's a Sauce Lab issue, or it's my code issue, or it's infrastructure issue. We don't know about that, and so we want more insights. We need to do something around that. Then there was slow execution. So teams grew. So I remember I was talking about 500 or 800 test cases. You're running PR Verify. If you're running on 2 browsers, you're running 1,500 test cases. Still okay. But if you are a team of 90, 100 people, you have at given time 7 or 8 active PRs running, because anytime somebody checks in, you start running these test cases. So 1,500 to 8, now you're looking into 12,000, 10,000 category. And our Sauce Lab usage is right now at 100% all the time. Like it's an amazing chart. We track everything. It's like 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's almost at 100% usage. And that what it does is it slows down people, because there are sometimes tests get queued up and they have to work around things. So we are still working some solution for that. And adoption. We started having the problem that till now, what we have done was we tried to cater to JavaScript solution. We had a JavaScript framework. Everything was Nightwatch or Appium for mobile test cases was working well. But then we started getting new teams where they were using Java or Python or something else, and they were. This is again going back to the non-opinionated thing I was talking about. They started complaining that we can't use Test Armada because I don't want to run Node.js. And there's a huge hatred between Java and Node.js communities, if you have ever faced that. I have a friend who's a Java expert, calls Node.js a cancer. And there's a huge fight going on between those communities. So it's very difficult to convert them into one language to other. So that's the problem was again. So we are hitting 40, 50 teams, but if we wanted to go beyond, we had to come up with a solution to support all these different languages too. Now, this problem is ongoing. We are still working on it. For automation insights, we are working on error categorization using Sauce Lab Analytics. It's still work in progress, so I don't have a solution slide for that. Same thing with slow execution. We are looking into headless browsers right now, which sounds promising. If at least for PR Verify, if we can move to headless browser, that will help a lot, because 70% of our test cases are run as a PR Verify test cases. So if we can take that on headless browser and use master and deploy Verify for real browsers, that will reduce the traffic and hopefully speeds everything up. So we are looking at that. But for team adoption, we came up with a solution that's called Test Armada as a service. So let's look into that. So out of the box, Test Armada works like this. We had a programming language Node. You were running with Magellan as our runner. Again, open source tool. If you want to get more details, please check out our testarmada.io website. And we had libraries like Nightwatch Extra, some Midway for mocking, and all these cumulatively become TDK, the test development kit. So we were taking that, and ultimately you get these benefits like data insights, resource manager, self-service. This was the whole stack. So if you're coming, you are a web development team or a mobile team who's willing to do JavaScript, you can use this solution out of the box, and it was fairly successful. But to solve the problem for the other side, where you had different languages, we came up with this solution where you could have any programming language. Let's say you're using any test runner, and I'm pretty sure whatever test runner you guys are using would be in the second box somewhere. There's a good chance that's there. And instead of having these libraries where you're forced to use JavaScript, we tried to make whole Test Armada more service-oriented. So now, data insight is available as a service. The APIs I was talking about, that's part of that was already there. Resource manager was also a service, so we encapsulated everything in that Test Armada service where all these things are available regardless of that language. What this unlocked was that all these different teams who are using different languages or different runners, they could use Test Armada now. And so think of a case of a team which is running a backend project in TestNG. They don't care about Sauce Lab, they don't care about Test Lab because it's just API testing, but they could still get data insights and self-service. They can get the reports, so they could use us. There could be a team which is running some Sauce Lab test cases, but they are very focused on Java TestNG, that I want to use Java only. So they could come, they can still use data insights, resource manager, self-service, all those things, but they are not using Magellan or Nightwatch. So that just making this as a service unlocked all this different potential or different teams who could be on board on system. So that made the Test Armada's current state. You will see I have color-coded the boxes now. The turquoise green, or I hope that I'm getting the color right, are the boxes which are configurable. We don't care if you're using our solution or not. So build server and SCM, obviously we don't have a solution for that. You can use Jenkins or GitHub or whatever. It's up to you, Bitbucket, Circle CI, the thing you want. But we do have that TA box. The blue box you see over there is the connector between SCM and build servers to just make sure that it's all servicify. And all these boxes you see where the Test Armada logo is also there, it just indicates that it's pluggable, but at the same time, Test Armada solution is also available. Wrapping up, last slide, this is the current status. Now we're running 125 test cases. We've moved to more than 100 projects. Everything we do is saved in development hours, so it's all there. I'm going to quickly, I know I'm running a little late, so last slide about the learnings. First thing, if you just remember one thing out of this whole presentation, just don't compromise on the core principles. If you're developing a framework which is not reliable, flexible, and speedy, and actionable insights, if you're ignoring one of these things, there would be some failure waiting for you. So this is an absolute necessity. Never compromise on these things. One more learning was that we are embracing this culture where developers has to write test cases. And the moment you start giving a Java test case to a Node.js project, you're creating this barrier. So make sure that dev and test code are as similar as possible. Build from scale and metrics from beginning. Make sure they're thinking about scale from the beginning. The late you go in that, the more price you have to pay. Try to build those emitters in your system from the beginning, because all the data I was showing before is possible because we have those logs inside. We know how many teams are mocking, how many teams are running test cases. The more data you have, the more successful you will be. So the more you think about this, it'll help you. Documentation is extremely important. You can make best of the tools, best of the system, but if it's not documented properly, if documentation is not current, nobody will get to use it, because you cannot go and explain it to 50 teams. If you're doing for your team, yes, you can explain it. But if you're dealing with 50 or 100 teams, documentation becomes super critical. And lastly, keep an eye on innovation, new tools coming up, because whatever Test Armada is right now, 1 or 2 years from now, we'll have different tools. Things will always keep changing. If the moment you start being stuck with the same tools, it'll create problems for you. So with that, I wanted to have a few more minutes for questions, but any questions you guys have? And I'll be around after this also, so more than happy to answer your questions in person if you have. Sure.
You mentioned you have a challenge with the test data becoming stale, right? How do you manage keeping your test data up to date?
Mocking. So basically the mocking tool, think about, in Walmart example, let's say there's a product which needs to have a pricing. Typically what happens is there's an orchestration layer which gets its data from different databases. If that layer is completely mocked, so during the test case you can define that for this case I want this pricing, this kind of structure, this all gets mocked. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
For those of you who have other questions for him, he'll be in the back getting demiked, and you guys can ask him questions back there. Have you ever wondered how the New York Times crossword puzzle stays so accurate? Well, our next session, if you join me at 11:30, we'll have a speaker that shares with you about that. So we'll see you back at 11:30.
Thank you.